Welcome to Superhero Pow. I'm your host nerd, Tom Fremgen. Hey, how you doing? You know, I was just looking through some old animation magazines and remember War Planets? I think they later renamed it Shadow Riders. But man, that was a cool show. It was made by Mainframe, who was most famous for doing the first CGI 3D cartoon for Saturday morning reboot. And then, they bounced around for a couple of years, got bought and sold a bunch of times. They were called Rainmaker for a good long time, and I guess they're back to being called Mainframe now, which is pretty cool. You always got to embrace your legacy. That's what we fans like. In the interim, I guess they made a ton of money making Barbie movies for DVD. Not exactly War Planets, but, got to take what you can get. And I'm sure it made a whole lot of Barbie fans happy to watch that. So can't sneeze at that. But just to mention War Planets again, that was apparently it was canceled by the old reason that the toys weren't selling. Even though the show was successful, the toys were not selling, and so the show got canceled. One of the so-called dark secrets of the animation industry is that the production cost of whatever the cartoon show is not covered by the sale price to whatever network it is. Typically speaking, so basically what it means is pretty much every animated show you see on TV in their first season, they're operating at a loss. The cost, the payment given to them by the network does not cover the production cost. And so the only way an animated show typically makes money is it has to go into reruns the next year. If it's dropped completely, then ouch. So that's why War Planets basically got canceled. They're getting cash from the toy sales. And when the toy sales weren't there, the networks weren't giving them enough money to keep it rolling. And the powers that be just decided they should just, put an end to it. And, happens all the time. It's not fun for us fans. But now to do a fun segue, speaking of War Planets, what about Star Wars? Have you been watching all the new shows on Star Wars? I know I'm hot and cold to them. It's a bit of a mixed bag, those shows. Some are good and some are just like, I got better things to do. Should go play a video game or read a comic book rather than watch this. And also, if I'm being brutally honest, I feel like I am really on the razor's edge of being done with Star Wars forever. Well, I mean, forever is a big word, but basically just being done with Star Wars. Because, I don't know, there's just not a lot of what they're making isn't that, I should say they're making too much, and most of it really isn't worth my time, especially when it comes to the movies. Now, mind you, all you Star Wars fans out there, Disney has said they made all their money back from Star Wars, which is a little strange. But Disney bought Star Wars, or I suppose they bought Lucasfilms for about $4 billion. Okay, and they said they've made it all back. Like within 10 years, they got it all back. Which is, that's really impressive. But that makes me curious. Did they make that, when they said they got the money back, is that the gross or the net? Were they subtracting the cost to making all those movies to make Star Wars Land and Disneyland? All the reports have been saying that the attendance is down at Disneyland. But, you got to get reservations now to go to Disneyland. You just can't drive up to the park in the old days and go inside. It's like you got to have a reservation, which I hope controls the crowds, because if you've ever been to Disneyland, it's not that big of a place and it can get mega crowded soon. I mean, when you have to wait, or when the wait for, about 10, 15 minutes on Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, if you have to wait in line over an hour to go on Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, no, thank you. But people have said that attendance is down, and they're not sure if they're making their money back from Star Wars Land. Even though they then say, they made their $4 billion back on the whole shebang. So who knows? Hollywood is very famous for doctoring their books to make it look like whatever they want it to look like. I think one of the funniest stories was the movie Forrest Gump. The writer of the original book, in his deal, he was going to get some residual payments if the movie was successful. And the studio was like, don't know what to tell you, man. Movie didn't even break even. Yeah, sorry, there's no residuals. It's like, this is Forrest Gump, man. This is like the biggest movie of the year. And somehow it didn't turn a profit? I find that very hard to believe. But that's the reason why there's never been a Forrest Gump sequel. Because, the writer of the books is like, no, you can't have the rights to my other books. You're denying me my profit from the first one. So Hollywood can do anything they want with money. They can prove anything they want. But getting back to Star Wars, I don't know. How damaged do you think their brand is? I know they've had a couple of good TV shows that people have liked, and some people have liked the films. But I think for the most part, for the general audience, it just kind of feels like the brand is damaged. And if you need some proof to that, I feel like just look at the movies. I mean, they cranked out a movie every year, and this was their plan, to crank out a movie every year of Star Wars. And they did it for 5 years in a row, and now it's been like 5 years plus, and we haven't seen a new movie. I mean, in Disney terms, they're an embarrassment to Marvel, right? I mean, Marvel's knocking out 3 movies a year, and Star Wars can't even get one. And the last movie they released, the Rise of Skywalker, I mean, that's their worst reviewed movie. I mean, it just barely beats out The Phantom Menace as the worst reviewed movie. Well, not counting the Clone Wars TV show turned into a movie pilot. That one's the worst reviewed, but, it's a TV pilot turned into a movie. Of course, it wasn't going to be that good. I mean, you may have liked it, but movie critics, that's not going to please a movie critic. And if you look at the trend of franchises, the movie that came before really plays into the box office of the next movie. Some good examples are like the X-Men films. X-Men 2 is still considered one of the best superhero X-Men movies. The next movie, X-Men 3, definitely an inferior product, but it made more money than X-Men 2 because it was riding on the wave of goodwill of X-Men 2. The public was jazzed by X-Men 2 and all set and ready to see X-Men 3, even though it was a worse film. And then because of that, X-Men 3 was a dud. Well, now it's a damaged brand in a lot of the general audience's eyes. So when they bring out X-Men First Class, which is a vastly superior movie to X-Men 3, it didn't do X-Men 3 numbers. See what I'm trying to say? If the last movie was bad, the next movie isn't going to make as much money, even if it's a better film. You can even see this play out with bad movies. Bad movies getting bad. Batman 3 wasn't too well received, and Batman 4 did worse. And while everybody was excited for a Spider-Man movie with The Amazing Spider-Man, the next movie, Amazing Spider-Man 2, did even worse. Because the first movies weren't that good. There's always going to be arbitrary to that, but I think this is a general rule you can say. If your movie, even if it makes a lot of money, if it's got bad word of mouth, you got to be very careful with the next film. You got to be very careful with that next film because even if it's great, it could die at the box office. And so I think that's where Star Wars is right now. Their big sequel films, relatively speaking, got progressively worse as they went along. So I don't think the general audience is too excited to see another Star Wars movie. And that's why when the news came out that they wanted to bring Daisy Ridley back and her Rey character, the lead of those last 3 sequel films, they want her to basically helm the next grouping of films. I don't know if that's a great idea. And this is nothing on Daisy Ridley. People who like to blame actors, I don't really get it a lot of times. They'll say like, oh, that person is a lousy actor. Did you see how bad they were? I kind of feel like, look at the lines they were saying. Give those lines to a good actor. Can anybody do better? Now, of course, I will say there are certain actors who, yes, they have a certain on-screen charisma that you can't really explain. Speaking classically, I would say like Cary Grant. I don't know if Cary Grant has ever made a bad movie in his life because it's just very easy to just sit there and watch Cary Grant talk and walk. But most of the time, if you got bad dialogue, you got bad dialogue. If you got bad direction, you got bad direction. There's really nothing an actor can do to save or destroy a movie. To me, a bigger measure of an actor is, are they in a good movie and doing a bad job? That's the real measure of a bad actor, in my opinion. It's kind of like, wow, that movie was great, but yeah, so-and-so was pretty awful. And then the reverse is true. Is an actor in a bad movie and they're doing a great job. So you're like, boy, that movie was terrible, but so-and-so was excellent. So for the most part, I don't blame Daisy Ridley for what happened in the Star Wars sequels. They are just ill-formed. And, how could they not be? Their original plan was to have 3 different directors, 3 different writers making 3 films that were connected at the same time pretty much. Of course it was a mess. And to a degree, that's why they got J.J. Abrams, who did the first one, come back to do the third one to see if you could tie it all up. And I don't know, does that make him a good soldier for going like, all right, I'll just wrap it up and get it done, even probably knowing it was an impossible situation. So it's good that Disney is taking their time to make their next film, but bringing Rey back? I don't know, it just seems like it's just going to remind everybody of how lackluster the sequels are and is really not going to help it push the franchise forward. Anything can happen. They can make a great film with her, I'm sure, but that's definitely not a step I would take. When Warner Brothers was going to pick up Batman again, they didn't call up George Clooney again and say, hey, George, how would you like to come back and do another Batman movie? That doesn't really sound like a smart decision, does it? Even though, yes, I know they brought him back for the Flash movie, but, that was just a joke. Do you think they could have actually gotten George to go back in the costume at that point? I'm inclined to think he would have said no. Anyway, what do you think about that? You think moving forward with Rey is a good idea to save the Star Wars movie franchise? Or should they just do something completely different? And do you think they're digging their grave even deeper? Kind of hope they don't do that. I would like to see a good Star Wars movie. But like I said, I'm right on the edge. They come out with one more dud, and I don't know when I'll make time to see Star Wars again. Anyway, thanks for watching or listening for these talkies that I make. And, if you could be so kind, like and subscribe, I'll do it again. Take care.